Good morning, everyone. Borada, and thank you very much for everyone who is in attendance today, and to members in particular for joining the meeting. This is the 15th of January meeting of Powys County Council Governance and Audit Committee. Thank you very much for joining. First of all, we'll move to item 1, which is apologies. And I'll ask the team to add any additional apologies that we have if I overlook any. I understand that Councillor David, who always joins our meeting, needs to leave by 11:30. Councillor Gareth, who's a member of the committee, is leaving early as well, and Councillor Chris will leave just shortly before the meeting completes. Jane Thomas, the Section 151 officer, is not joining us immediately, but she will join the meeting later. She has conflicting diary appointments. And we have apologies also from Councillor Matt Dorrance and from some other officers. Carrie-Anne, Kath, are there any other apologies that we should record at this stage?
So I've got apologies from officers John Forsey, Nina Davis and Daniel Burgess.
Right, that's fine. Thanks very much.
Chair, we also have just received apologies from Councillor Sandra Davis for this main meeting.
Right, okay. Okay, thank you very much, Kath. Thanks very much. We'll move on to disclosures of interest, and I'll invite members to indicate any disclosures of interest linked to the agenda of today's meeting. I'm not seeing any hands, therefore I will move us on to agenda item 3, which is the minutes of our meeting that took place on the 20th of November last year. I am going to invite members to seek points of clarification, correction, or matters arising. I'll simply invite members to indicate if there are any points that they would like to follow up or from the minutes or any matters arising. If there are no questions in connection with the minutes, I'll simply ask the committee if the committee is content to move to approve the minutes and that they are agreed and effectively signed by myself. Councillor Gareth, and can I have a seconder, Councillor William? Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you. In that case, we move on to Audit Wales items. We've got 3 items with Audit Wales colleagues today. The first of which is the National Fraud Initiative in Wales report 2022-23. I'll ask Gareth from Audit Wales briefly to introduce the report, and then I'll open the floor to questions on the report and to comments on the clear messages that it's giving us. So Gareth, if I could hand over to you, please.
Thank you for the introduction, Chair, and good morning, Board members. Just to take everybody through this, the National Fraud Initiative is run by the Cabinet Office, and it's a biannual UK-wide counter-fraud exercise using computerised techniques to compare information about individuals that would be held by different public bodies and on different financial systems that may suggest the existence of fraud or error. Those data matches are then sent to participating bodies such as Powys County Council for assessment and review. An audited body's response to those data matches should be proportionate and not excessive, taking a risk-based approach and prioritising those matches. Audited bodies then record their outcomes, and we'll come back to outcomes very quickly in a second, Chair, are based on their assessment and review, and then we compile those outcomes into a national report. We published the national report in October 2024, and to very briefly summarise the key messages, In the 2022-23 round, which we're looking at today, there were identified £7.1 million worth of outcomes across the public sector in Wales, and the outcomes refer to the financial value of the fraud, error, or overpayment detected or prevented. So the outcomes are split between actual outcomes, actual amounts that participants have received as fraud, error, or overpayment, or estimated outcomes, i.e. those will be the estimated amounts that will be the value of the loss or fraud if it was not then prevented. Across Wales, there were 4,354 data matches with reported outcomes, and it's important to note that in the report we haven't included any discrete data on Powys County Council or any other council or audit body where we present this report, but we have reported at a national level. The council level specific information is obviously provided to your NFI key contact, and Governance and Audit Committee receive regular updates on the outcomes and processing activity from the team. 97% of the 7.1 million reported outcomes in Wales related to local authority data matches around council tax, discounts, housing benefits, blue badges, housing waiting lists and pensions. Council tax discounts accounted for 41% of the outcomes of the exercise nationally. In terms of what happens, once the bodies have identified those outcomes, they can then take appropriate action to recover the money. As of the 31st of March, the audited bodies have confirmed that £2.7 million of actual outcomes had been or were in the process of being recovered as a result of the exercise. The benefits of reviewing and participating in the NFI can improve systems of internal control as well. The NFI results may also highlight areas for other improvement as well. So what we've done since the report was published is we've produced a self-assessment checklist for NFI teams locally, and we are aware that officers are working through that report and we'll be preparing that for submission to the committee in a future meeting. But it is important to stress that the NFI is one aspect of an organisation's counter fraud arrangements. It is a point in time exercise, and it needs to be seen as a part of those wider arrangements that the council will have in place to ensure that fraud is not committed against the council. So that's my brief summary of those. Happy to take any questions on the report, and officers may wish to add to the points that I've raised there.
Thank you very much, Gareth. Before I invite questions from members, I'll just pause to give council officers the opportunity to respond or comment if they wish to. No, I'll open the floor to questions, colleagues. I'll take Councillor Pete and then Councillor Chris.
Thanks, Chair. So it wasn't so much a comment, it was just a quick observation, and apologies, perhaps should have noticed before. Just on page 2 of the report, Gareth, I think there's a typo there. It says 1st of April 2022 through to the 31st of March 2024.
Sorry, we have picked that up and we will make that correction. Thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you. No, that was it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Pete. Councillor Chris. Chris, are you on mute, maybe?
I am indeed. On the apologies, Chair. Thank you, Gareth, for an interesting report on the as you mentioned, lots of different statistics and values within the report. My question is what I look at is how much does it cost to produce this report, and is that greater than what we're saving, or is it the other way around? Is that investment value for money? And then what happens with the savings coming in? Is that coming back into Powys County Council if it's Powys County Council findings, or is that taken into a central pot? What happens to that to see where that process goes?
Thank you, Councillor Chris. On your second part of the question, the outcomes which the council, the data matches, if the council takes those forwards and looks to recover those the monies which have already been paid out. Obviously, that comes back to Powys County Council. If it is about preventing payments being made which are fraudulent, then obviously that then stops the money going out from Powys County Council. So there's a benefit there in two ways. In terms of the cost of producing the report, as I said in my initial introduction, it is a UK-wide initiative. So I don't have an exact figure of how much it costs us to produce a report at a UK level, but I will commit to taking that away as an action to respond to the committee following the meeting. What I can say is that obviously the initiative identified £7.1 million of outcomes across Wales, of which 2.7 million were recovered by the 31st of March 2024. I don't want to prejudge my answer, but I would be hopeful that we will not have cost that much to produce the report, and therefore it does provide an important part of the counter fraud network and arrangements across the whole of Wales and the UK, and it is an important part of that. But as I said, it is a point in time exercise, and it is only but one part of those arrangements. And I'm aware that later on in the committee meeting, there is obviously the report of the counter fraud team within the council, and they may well be positioned to also speak to that. But I will take away an action to look for the cost of the production of the report to provide you that assurance.
Yeah, I'm trying to get more of the whole system costs, because obviously you'll have the initial investigation and scoping that you're doing as a part of that report, but then it will go into the criminal justice system, and then you've got costs on that and further investigations going down that line. And it's about just seeing the whole picture rather than just part of it.
Thank you very much, Chris, for your question. And thank you very much, Gareth, for your interim answer and for making a commitment to bring more detailed information to us in due course. Thank you very much, both. John, please.
Thank you, Chair. Gareth, my question is, I'm not quite sure whether you're going to be able to answer it. Powys has a very small anti-fraud team. Can you tell us how the resource that Powys is allocating to this compares with other councils?
I'm not well placed at this point in time to be able to give you a specific answer against other councils. But if you would like me to take that away, we can.
I think it would be useful, because Yvette, our manager in that area, has indicated that staff are self-financing. They actually recover more than their cost, and I'm interested to see what an optimum size team would be.
Okay. I will try and find that out, and we'll seek to provide an update to the committee.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. A really interesting question to benchmark both investment in teams and impact on recoveries across Wales. That would be really instructive information if we were able to obtain it. And thank you, Gareth. Councillor Pete, I can see your hands up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry, I was just having a muse, Gareth. I'm not quite sure if it's a question for you or one for officers actually, but I was just musing on point 48, which was talking about the residential care homes there, and some initiatives there to stop that particular example of a fraud happening. So I guess my question is, with all these initiatives that come up, how do we get them, if you like, out of your report and into our controls framework? So maybe more one for our officers to make sure that these things are becoming embedded, or almost in a way, Gareth. I guess you work yourself out of a job because you find it, or we put it all in our controls and everything, and it doesn't happen again. So I don't know how we build that. I don't know if we've got that link or how we build that link.
I'm happy to start with part of the answer, but I'm sure that officers may wish to come in and just give some detail on the other side.
Thanks.
As I identified in my introduction, the process is an electronic data matching exercise, and obviously as technology develops, we are able to do that more efficiently. What we do is the data matching throws up potential matches that are then sent to the individual audited bodies, and those are in health, local councils, and other public bodies for further investigation. So our work reviews the systems and identifies where there are anomalies in the system that need to be investigated. What it doesn't do is definitively say that there is actually something happening here. What it does is it identifies a potential thing for the audited bodies to investigate. So that is where our jurisdiction, in effect, stops. We pass that information into the audited bodies, and they can see both and Ian wish to come in. So they may be able to then talk about what the process is once that information is passed to the individual audited body. So I'll stop there and allow others to come in.
Thanks, Gareth, and thank you, Councillor Peat, for the question. I'll bring Ian in, and then Anne, if you want to come in after Ian, you're very welcome to do so. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Just to let you know that I am the key contact for the National Fraud Initiative for Powys, and it's our role in SWAP to make sure that we process all the information correctly and we go through the fair processing. But then we receive the matches back, and the current approach in the council is that those are allocated to either to the services that are responsible, and they then undertake the investigations. Where we find there are issues, they are obviously highlighted as part of that investigation process. We would either expect the service to take on board the control issue that had caused that to occur, or we would carry out a piece of internal audit work that would help support the delivery of those controls. So just to let you know that either the service or we would make sure those controls are implemented.
Thank you, Ian. Anne, is there anything you would like to add?
No, but thank you. Thank you, Ian, for coming in and providing an explanation. And yes, just to confirm, it isn't just finance, as you'd imagine. It's across the council. There are lead officers who undertake the matching exercise and tasked with doing that. And this is happening at this point in the year, actually. Working group established to set up and undertake that work through through the immediate term, actually. So that's ongoing.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Anne. And I can see our expert Yvette has got her hand up. So Yvette, over to you.
I'm not so much of an expert, and excuse me, I'm a bit croaky because I'm on the tail end of flu. I just wanted to say also, to add to what Ian had said about looking at controls and things, whilst our team, the fraud team, don't deal with all the matches across the council, all of the service areas do know that if there is something that stands out as a fraud, they come straight to us and they refer it to us to pick up, which we then do. I just wanted to bring some clarity to that point. Thank you.
Thanks, Yvette. Thank you for coming in. Thanks, Ian. Any further questions on the National Fraud Initiative report? No, but it remains then for me to thank Gareth for bringing the report to us, and for the team for responding to the ongoing threat of fraud, and we'll come to Yvette's report later on the agenda. So thank you very much, colleagues.
Chair, is it okay? Just to confirm that the self-assessment checklist has been issued to audited bodies, and I understand that officers are working through completing that self-assessment checklist, which I'm sure will be of interest to the Governance Audit Committee in terms of assurance at a later point in time.
Thank you very much, Gareth. That's extremely helpful. Thank you. We'll note that and we can come back to it. Thank you. Thanks very, very much. That moves us on, colleagues, to item 5, and I'm not going to necessarily take item 5 and item 6 together, but my sense is that there's a kind of inevitability of the links between item 5 and item 6 being made through discussion. So I think we should recognise that. But first of all, Gareth, I'll ask you to introduce item 5, which is the National financial sustainability of local government report for Wales. It's a really, really important report for local government and the wider public sector in Wales. I'll ask Gareth to introduce it, and then we'll also come on to item 6, which is the Powys County Council particular report on financial sustainability. Gareth.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the first report I'm going to present is the Auditor General's report on the financial sustainability of local government across Wales. This is the third of the Auditor General's such reports, and it was published at the start of December 2024. I think I'd like to highlight the main find that this report is a summary of the 22 reports that we had done in local councils across Wales. And also it was published at the same time as our local government financial sustainability data tool. So these reports are really important. We have done them in 2020 and 2021. For this iteration, we were looking to be a little bit more forward-looking rather than looking at past performance. The Auditor General has taken it that his role is to highlight the risks, the cumulative impact of financial restraint on local government, and that there cannot be an assumption that the future for the sector is sustainable as it currently is. As colleagues will be aware on the committee, councils in England have had to submit Section 114 reports. The fact that we haven't had that happen in Wales is a testament, in the Auditor General's view, of the commitment from both officers and elected members across Wales, and also members of Governance and Audit Committee, and the tough decisions that have already been made. However, the position is fragile, and it is very sensitive to the competing complex factors that affect the finances of local government. The Auditor General's view is that it is his role to highlight these risks and provide assurance over the arrangements that councils have, and that he and the team have reviewed the steps that councils are taking and the arrangements they have in place to support their own financial sustainability. Some we found through our work are better placed than others to weather the financial challenges that may lie ahead. But given the scale of the funding gaps projected for local government in the coming years, all councils will need to keep up or increase the pace of change if they are to meet the urgency and the scale of the challenge. And the Welsh Government will also need to support the sector in meeting that challenge. There are some specific things that I wanted to highlight to you in terms of that. And that's in terms of local government has faced unprecedented challenges since 2008, the credit crunch period, and this has affected how councils and services operate differently. Some challenges are outside of their control. In real terms, spending by councils has decreased between 2008 and 2020, rose slightly during the pandemic, but overall the growth in funding for councils remained well below that before 2008, and that means that councils have to make difficult choices. Some services have been protected from budget reductions more than others, and for some service areas this has varied across councils. It's notable that there have been significant falls in spending around regulatory and preventative areas of council spending. Wider contextual challenges greatly influence demand for services and costs for councils, and there can be, for example, where we've seen large and unforeseen increases in inflation and also energy costs. So some of those things that have seen the real term changes and increases, children and family social services have seen a 94% increase in real terms over 15 years. Waste management, 15% increase, coastal protection, 91%, schools, 8%. However, while some areas have increased, areas such as community safety have seen a 62% real terms decrease, development control of 45% reduction, libraries and planning 41% reductions. Those are all shown in the report. An experience from across the UK offers some potential for learning for local councils and others, and we've drawn on a range of sources for this, but some of the common themes within Section 114 reports include an unwillingness to see the reality of the situation, ignoring warnings about the financial position both internally and externally, and to avoid recognising that current plans are not as effective as they could be. An absence of leadership has also been identified, being unable to take difficult decisions both by officers and elected members, and that means less problem solving and scrutiny of proposals. Inadequate governance processes, a significant lack of oversight by elected members, including governance and audit committees, and then weak financial management, weak and insufficient processes that lack accountability, sustainability and transparency. This can be indicated by a substantial decline in reserves, which limits solutions to problems when they arise. So we've picked out some of those. All councils have arrangements, as we found across Wales, to understand their short and medium-term financial positions. Generally, however, they do not take a longer-term view of financial sustainability. We found very few councils have comprehensive understanding of how they will close their projected budget gaps beyond the next 2 years. While some councils have identified a level of savings required, there is a continual reliance on annual savings rounds rather than on longer-term transformation plans, and I'm sure that's a theme we may return to. This can mean a reliance on short-term savings and or short-term use of reserves. We found overall that councils have generally appropriate financial reporting arrangements for the short and medium term, but assessing and monitoring the impact of their financial decisions is a weakness across Wales. And it is about the impact of the plans and decisions on people, communities, and the wellbeing objectives that councils set. And we heard that there are some concerns that national issues or processes can make financial planning more difficult. And that includes the funding formula used to distribute Welsh Government funding to local government, the timing of local government funding settlements, and the lack of multi-year settlements that are present in other spending areas, and additional responsibilities being placed on councils without funding being made available. So just to finalise my comments, Chair, the Auditor General did not make any specific recommendations to either local councils or Welsh Government, because we've made recommendations to local councils in each of the local reports. We didn't undertake an audit of an assessment of the Welsh Government's arrangements as part of this, because this is a collation of the local reports, the 22 local reports. So we didn't put together any work, we didn't undertake any specific audit work on Welsh Government. However, that key message that the financial position of local government is unsustainable over the medium term, unless action is taken, has been taken seriously by those across the sector. And it's one that Welsh Government, local councils and those committed to the sector will need to find need to chart a path to a sustainable future. That's where I'd like to conclude my remarks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Gareth. That was a really, really helpful précis of some of the really difficult messages that are in the report, not just for Powys, but for the whole of Wales and for Welsh Government in its stewardship and funding of the whole system. So thank you very much for that. I can see Councillor David would like to come in, so I'll welcome Councillor David in, and then I'll open the floor for further discussion and comment. Thank you very much, Gareth. That was really helpful. David.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Gareth, for that report. A very helpful report, an interesting report. You did touch on the question I've got towards the end of your presentation, actually. With regard to this national report, there's a theme running through it, a very strong theme that appears to apply to the majority of councils in Wales, and that's the lack of long-term planning. Now, if you look at page 10, you actually identify issues there: the funding formula, the local government funding settlement, the lack of multi-year settlements, and there are no recommendations built into the report that actually address those issues, and those issues ultimately are the responsibility of Welsh Government. And for local authorities, individual local authorities, to address a lot of the concerns that you've applied within the commentary around those authorities, those issues that have to be addressed and sorted. And I don't understand why there are no recommendations in the national report.
Thank you, David. Gareth, I think you touched on that a wee bit, but could you perhaps just clarify, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor David, for the question. As I said, what this does is it draws together the themes that we've heard in the 22 local reports and the information that we've received and the evidence that we've analysed. That, however, doesn't say that we've undertaken an audit of Welsh Government's arrangements in this space. What we have done is relay those concerns and collate those concerns into a national picture but without undertaking audit work, we're unable to make recommendations to an audited body, and Welsh Government is an audited body, so we haven't undertaken the audit work to be able to verify. What we have heard is those are the concerns of the sector around the financial sustainability and some of the constraints on the sector becoming ensuring it's securing financial sustainability. Those are key messages for Welsh Government. However, we haven't undertaken the audit to verify whether or not that is actually the position in terms of the Welsh Government. So that is a really important message that Welsh Government needs to take on board. We're aware that since the report has been taken forward, there are further discussions happening around the longer term funding for local government because of the message that the Auditor General has given. However, that's why we haven't given that recommendation in the report, because we hadn't. It wasn't. This is a summary of the 22 local reports, including some of those key themes.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. So it's simply pointing out to Welsh Government that their assistance is needed then if we as local authorities are going to have to address some of these issues. Yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor David. I think that was an extremely pertinent question in terms of the context of the national picture. I'll invite Councillor William to come in and then Gareth Hall.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Gareth, for speaking to this report. In some ways, what I want to raise is sort of echoing elements of what Councillor David just said. I think this is a really essential report for us to engage with and to gain an understanding of in terms of the sustainability of the local government sector as a whole. But it really does seem that this is only part of the picture. We don't necessarily, as individual councils, hold all the levers to address this, because there have been a number of attempts, some of them more sustained than others, by Welsh Government over the last 15, 18 years to look at the organisation of government, the sustainability of the structures of local government, because we have 22 local authorities, 3 special purpose local authorities in the national park, so 25 authorities for a proud small nation of well under 4 million people. And I think you'd struggle to find another example of a country with so much local government in that sense, and the scale and the critical mass issues that throws up. Does Audit Wales, or has the Wales Audit Office in its previous guise done any work on the sustainability of the structures within which the 22 plus 3 local authorities are actually working? Because it seems to me that if the efforts of people as august as Leighton Andrews, the late Carl Sargent, and others, when they've held this office, have grappled with it, and then they've withdrawn from the field because of local sentiment and the wish to retain local identity and so on. But it seems to me that we are coming to a critical point, maybe seeking to engage you in controversy, and maybe you'll not be minded to go there. But I'd be very interested in your thoughts on that matter.
Thank you very much, Councillor William. I will ask you to respond to Councillor William Gareth, but obviously, as Councillor William already recognises, I think, in his caveat, Audit Wales colleagues can't and won't be drawn into the politics of these decisions and the history, but there is a long history of reviews and decisions as to the effectiveness, value for money, and collaboration across local government and the wider public sector in Wales, and yet we are here with these very strong messages about financial sustainability. I think all colleagues would recognise that financial sustainability isn't just about money, it's about people's lives and services and the outcomes that we deliver to the citizens of Wales. So Gareth, if you could, within the terms of your remit, address Councillor Williams' remarks, please.
Okay. I will endeavour to chair within the within the bounds of the cabinet. To answer your specific question, Councillor William, we haven't undertaken any specific work around the sustainability of the structures of local government. As such, the 22 plus the 3 model which we currently have to date, and our work is to audit the outcomes, the arrangements, not the policies per se. So that is where we will always keep our work focused, is around the arrangements, not around the policy, and that is really clear because we're not permitted to do that via a legislative basis. It's to look at not there are arrangements in place. So I can't say a huge amount further than that in response to your question at this point.
Completely appreciate that, Gareth, and thank you for framing that in as far as you can. But I think the issues do need addressing more widely, but not necessarily in this forum or by yourselves. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor William. Your points are well made. I'll bring Gareth Hall in, and then John, and then Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Gareth, on first reading, the title of your paper, Financial Sustainability, is slightly misleading because finance is just one dimension of the statutory role that local authorities and the Welsh Government and other public bodies have to play under the well-being of Wales legislation. And that's got, as well as financial, it's got economic, social, cultural, and environmental dimensions to it. But I think you clarified that in your introduction to the paper. And one of the sustainable development ways of working is taking a long-term view of things. And I think that's a very important message that comes out of this. But you also refer to tough choices having to be made in the long term. What I would suggest is that as local authorities confront this, and the council here is confronting it already through its sustainable Powys initiative, is there is almost in local government an obsession with funding and budgets, but to a lesser degree, the outputs and outcomes they deliver. So what I would strongly suggest is that in taking this forward, because this is a great state of the nation, the local authorities and the Welsh government are going to have to reflect on this. But as a framework for making those tough decisions, there needs to be priorities around these sustainable development priorities about each aspect of the well-being of residents of Wales. And what we want along this very difficult journey where there will be tough decisions made is to have performance measures along the way so we can measure whether local authorities are on track to deliver these priority outcomes that they will have chosen as the best outcomes for their citizens and particularly young and vulnerable people. So I think my message is this linkage between finance as a means to an end of delivering long-term priority outcomes which are in the best interests of residents of Wales and Powys.
Thank you, Gareth. I'm just looking at my notes on the report, and I think I was cognizant when I was reading para 16 and 17 around assessing and monitoring the impact of financial decisions, of encouraging the council in its development of sustainable Powys to really home in on benefits realisation, not just financial benefits realisation, but service benefits realisation, qualitative and quantitative benefits realisation. How do we capture these benefits? How do we measure them? How do we communicate them? So I would thoroughly echo your comments, Gareth, and place them in very firmly in the context of paragraph 17 of the report. I'll take John and Chris's comments, and then I'll go back to Gareth and perhaps officers to address the conversation that we're having and the queries that we're making thus far. John and then Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Gareth, I read your report with some interest. It wasn't the report I have to say that I was expecting. I was expecting something much more detailed in terms of comparisons between councils and where the opportunities lay for improvements to both services and financial outturns by comparisons within councils. We've been indoctrinated over the years with the SITFA principles of financial resilience. They were benchmarking, having clear savings plans, clear reserves management, and in particular linking capital and revenue expenditure and thinking about them together rather than separately. I was a wee bit surprised, I have to say, that we didn't see in this report any balance sheet analysis. I'm thinking particularly in terms of liquidity, but there are other balance sheet ratios which might have been useful as comparators. Nor indeed did we see any comparison within the report of the way in which the various councils spend their money, the proportion on social services, the proportions on education and so on. Was this, I presume this was outside your terms of reference, but as I say, I'm rather disappointed that we aren't be able to access this information through this report. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks very much, John. I'll bring in Councillor Chris and then I'll go back for responses from Audit Wales and from officers. Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Gareth. It was an interesting report, and I think some of your commentary that you provided changed some of the contextualization to the report, and I think that was really helpful because in some part I was looking at it as you were giving a reflection about our approach to sustainability moving forward over a longer term period. But in some ways, what you've said is this is the reality of the 22 local authorities as they see it today. And we can't really look at the long term because we're focusing on the short term and the medium term. But in some ways, I get some assurances from the Powys one is that we do have a little bit of a grip around the short and the medium term. So that is helpful. But what you're really saying is that the audience for this report is Welsh Assembly Government saying, take note, because if you don't do something here, there is going to be a consequential coming out. And you've mentioned what's happened within England with the 114 notices coming in. Wales has showed robustness really in saying it has managed its processes, its reserves. As John mentioned, some of the other things around capital and revenue, etc., has moved us forward. I think for me, there's just some considerations around of if you try to change services to become more longer term, and there's a question there is what do you mean by longer term? Is that over 5 years? Because if it is, a council is only elected for a 5-year period, so that makes that a challenge in its own right. How can we plan for further long term if you've got a political influence within that? But as a local councillor, if someone comes and says they're going to change something within my area, I'm going to be saying, no, you're not. I'm going to defend that. And particularly if the community doesn't want that as an aspect on there. So it's getting that political reality to what the community wants. And then the other factor that, again, I didn't know whether you picked up within your context is about the media and the role media plays within this, because as soon as we go and say we're going to change something, people look at that negatively rather than positively. But for me, there's an aspect, and I think David, Councillor David mentioned it, around some of the factors around how formulas come together about funding allocation. Our age demographic within Powys is very different to some other authorities. And has that been taken into consideration? Because going forward, our demand on services is always going to increase if you've got an older population going forward. So that rurality aspect, I don't know of whether that's been considered, and I hope that if there are further discussions going on with the Welsh Assembly government, that's taken into consideration. Finally, I would just say, in relation to this, you can't look at the local authorities in isolation. We have to look at the bigger whole of system approach. There is a perfect storm arriving, because the challenges to health boards and to other partner organizations are significant as well. And if everything all changes all at the same time, we won't be able to actually plan for the longer term, because you're going to be fighting the fires now. So there is a consequential to that system. And I just wondered whether you'd factored that in your thought processes moving forward.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris. We'll pause there. I can see that, I did see that Councillor Gareth wanted to come in, but we'll pause there anyway, and I'll ask Gareth from Audit Wales to address some of the points made, and also invite officers, senior officers, to come in at this stage if they would wish. Gareth, Audit Wales, Gareth, is there anything you wish to add? I do appreciate that some of this conversation is straying beyond the remit of your role as a senior auditor in Audit Wales, so please be aware of that and limit your answers accordingly. And then I'm going to bring in the Chief Executive.
Okay. Just very briefly, so I'll adjust John's points earlier on. Those points that you raise are very important around the SIPFA principles and those around liquidity and other analyses. In my introduction, I did say that we do have our national financial sustainability data tool, and such ratios are presented within there. The report that we did produce is around arrangements rather than necessarily those data points, but those data points are important, and that information is all in the public domain, and those important elements are there. I will obviously take that feedback back to the team that have designed this particular round of the financial sustainability report, so that we can take that into account when we design our future reports. And I see the acknowledgement of that, and thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. But those indicators are in the public domain, so it was that is important for us to do. Councillor, sorry, I'm just quickly going up. Councillor Hall, we did, so Councillor Gareth, we did bring those elements around the Sustainable Development Principle and highlight the challenges that local councils do have in terms of trying to plan for the longer term when they are in receipt of single annual budgets. That is highlighted in our report, and we do highlight how that does cut across the Sustainable Development Principle, which has been agreed, and that piece of legislation which guides all public bodies in Wales, which to guide them towards planning for the medium to longer term. So we do highlight that. Those issues around Councillor Chris, the issues around the wider system reform, obviously that's on our radar in terms of the audit work that we do. I won't be drawn on making a comment around that because that's outside of our remit. and I will just come back to the Auditor General did publish in 2024 From Firefighting to Future Proofing, the challenge for Welsh public services. And that is about addressing some of these really difficult issues that public bodies do face, and to try and get that shift away from relentless firefighting of today's immediate challenges to delivery of sustainable public services that are fit for the future. So those are key things that are out there. We have made commentary on those, but again, it is for individual audited bodies to find their response within their local context. And at that point, I think I may stop, because I can see that a couple of others from senior leadership in the organisation may wish to respond. It's probably appropriate for them to do so at this point.
Thank you very much, Gareth. I'm going to bring the Chief Executive in, and I can see Councillor James would like to make a comment, and I can see that Diane wants to come as well. I've got a few final comments as well, but I am moving to drawing this item to a close, colleagues, just with an eye on the clock. That does not diminish the importance of this item, which I am sure we will continue to discuss after this meeting in various fora. But I'll move to bring in Emma, the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair, Committee. Listening with intent, the discussion that's been held already this morning, and Councillor Chris Walsh has made some very good comments about the reality of the landscape that we find ourselves in, and looking at the whole system component. And I think one of the things that was interesting for me within the report was that, and I did find this report of significant interest actually, that's in 2005-06 to 22-23 that local government only received an 11% real term increase, but when you look at the NHS, that grew by 60%. And yet in terms of meeting the aspirations around the NHS and the delivery mechanisms of some of the crises that we're seeing, that will only work if we work in parallel and are funded accordingly in order to provide our services to support that. And I think the other element for us from a strategic perspective as a local authority, over the last 13 years, we've actually taken out £136 million from the base budget. And that averages at 10 million each year. And I have to say, it does get harder each year, because you'll hear, the expression of low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit has gone. So there are no easy decisions going forward, and hence why really embracing and engaging with Sustainable Powys and the organisation putting itself on that sustainable footing, both not just financial, actually, when we were talking about the benefits earlier, but from a social and environmental component as well. And I think picking up on Gareth Hall's challenges around the benefits, about those not just being financial, but actually looking at the outcomes. So we can look at it through the different lens of individual, community and organisation. And normally as an organisational level, it will come down to finances. But when you look at things on an individual and community basis for benefits, they're very different. And we're focusing our attention in terms of place-based planning, the 13 localities and the delivery of services within those localities, and how we really embrace and immerse ourselves within that. But just to remind everybody that our current reporting systems, our quarterly performance framework that we utilise, and our quarterly performance reporting does use a results-based accountability framework, which does look at how much, how well, but what difference. And so that takes us away, again, just from the money perspective, but also to think about those broader benefits. And there's two examples that I can think of already. Fostering, and the business case that came forward for the investment in Investor Save in fostering, that is part of Sustainable Powys, was actually off the back of the Closer to Home strategy for our young people, and really investing in our network in county, making sure that the service is the right service with the right capacity, so that we can support as many young people as we can as close to home. As a result of doing that and driving that quality, what we're expecting to see are improved outcomes for individual, that increased sustainability in terms of our network, but a reduced cost delivery. So the cost or the financial is almost the result of the other elements. It's in part a driver, but actually the most important driver there is about the young person and them receiving quality care in county. And the second element is actually around waste. So just as an example, in respect of our waste strategy has just gone forward as part of Sustainable Powys, sets out some aspirations and is currently out to consultation. But that's about driving up the standards in terms of recycling. We're already a high performer when it comes to recycling in Wales and on an international level. But we could drive that recycling, and that in return can actually benefit us financially. So it's not always about the financial driver. There are other benefits that we can do. And obviously there's the environmental impact there that is significant as well. So I just wanted to touch on those two components because they were based on the discussion that's held already. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Emma. Thanks very much for providing some of the examples, actually putting some colour onto this. It's really helpful. I'm going to bring in Councillor James, the leader, and then I'll go to Diane. So
thank you so much, Chair. I hope you can hear me. I'm on my phone because my...
We can't really hear you, Councillor. Leader.
I'm doing my... hang on a sec.
Wait
a minute. Oh, gosh, I'm so sorry.
We can't... I'm sorry, but we can't hear you. You're really quiet.
Yeah, is that any better?
Yeah, a wee bit better.
I'm sorry, I'm on my phone because I couldn't get my laptop to function.
Ah, right, okay, I've got you.
I just wanted to build slightly on the points that Chris Walsh very wisely made around the wider public sector, looking at this within the context of the wider public sector. I was fortunate, well, unfortunate enough or fortunate enough, depending on how you look at it. I went out of local government just before the credit crunch, and I came back in 7 years after it happened. And I have to say the report, I think, and Gareth Jones's point about how the source of our current difficulties was the credit crunch, and he was absolutely right about that, because the difference you could see between Powys County Council prior to the credit crunch and Powys County Council 7 years afterwards and since, it was quite dramatic for me to experience. And the sort of breadth of things that we were previously able to do, the resource within the authority in terms of staffing and so on was exponentially different before to after. And I think the point that Chris Walsh was making was around the quantum of money within the public sector system, which is really sound. So we can look at the sustainability of local government, and that's fine as far as it goes. And I know it's the remit that was given, and I think the report is absolutely excellent in that respect. It's really, I can't disagree with any of it. But I think that if you cannot ignore the issue of the quantum of money available within the public services generally, that you have to look at local government within that context, and Chris is right about that. And I think the really interesting thing is the experience of the local authorities in England is that, and clearly previous and current government in Westminster sees bigger as a mechanism to try and deal with this mismatch between the amount of money available in local government and the responsibilities it's asked to discharge and its ability to do that. So that they're going with combined authorities, moving forward the move from districts and counties to unitary authorities. And it's really interesting that some of the authorities that have recently gone unitary are the ones that are in the biggest trouble. Shropshire, a good example. Somerset, another good example. Now, that says to me, and that doesn't surprise me actually, because it harks back to, if I may say so, an obsession at central government level with structures. That they think that you change the structure, but don't do anything about the quantum of money that you're putting into the system, that suddenly everything will be okay. And it doesn't work like that. And we saw that in Wales, we've seen it we're seeing it now in England. And I think, whilst I realise I'm straying outside the remit of Gareth's report in a sense, but I think it would be helpful if reports like this could be landed within that context and analysed within that context of understanding the wider public sector system. The fact of the matter is there simply isn't a big enough quantum of money within the public sector system, either anywhere in the UK, to deliver the quality of and standard of services that governments of all colours would wish to see. And it's quite clear in Wales that what the Welsh government wants to see, and I very much support them in this aspiration, is public services that match the standards we see commonplace in Western Europe, the rest of Western Europe. We're nowhere near that, nowhere near it, because we have nowhere near enough money going into the system to achieve that. Until that is actually recognised and addressed, we're going to be doing this, stripping £10 million a year out of our revenue budget every year until such point there really is no more £10 million, and we're quite close to that now, I guess. And then at that point, that aspiration just falls flat on its face. And I think that would be helpful if Audit Wales could frame these reports within that wider context. And I think that's what Chris was asking. I very much support him in that desire. And I hope that's helpful, Chair. I don't want to sound too depressing, but that's just my observation of just how things have gone from being in the council when it was actually quite flush with money to the point where actually, you know, it struggled for every year just to get its budget set, let alone improve things. And I think you can fiddle with structures as much as you like, and we will, you know, strive every sinew to transform the shape of this authority, as I'm sure other authorities will do, to try and get the structures of within the authority to deliver within the money that's available to us as best we can. But I think we have to be realistic. Unless that quantum is increased quite significantly, we're not going to see the improvements in quality as well as quantity that we would all like to see. Okay, thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. And I recognise much of what you say about that sort of longer view of history and the total context in which we're operating. Myself, I've been reflecting on the past couple of decades of public service reform in Wales, you know, through making the connections, delivering the connections, Beecham report, Simpson report, Williams Commission, etc. And whilst each has a slightly different focus, if you step back, they are actually all in this space. And you kind of sum up the context in which all of those reviews and commissions were undertaken, and in which this particular financial sustainability report has been taken as well. And it's a challenging space, but as authorities with statutory responsibilities and duties, we need to step up to the plate. I can no longer see Diane's hand. I don't know whether that means Diane has decided not to comment or question, or I'm not seeing Diane now. I'll just pause briefly.
Thanks, Chair. I think we'd moved to a different aspect. So
different world.
Okay.
Right, okay. The moment had passed, Diane. Apologies. Apologies. Are there any further comments or questions? As I say, I think this is something that will be discussed in various fora and again, but looking to the clock, I think we probably do need to draw this item to a close. One of the things, just as a final comment from me, as well as the recommendations, the responding to the two particular recommendations in the Powys specific report, I wondered, and I'll leave this as an open question for the Chief Executive and her senior team to reflect on. I wondered if there could be merit in undertaking a kind of self-assessment of Powys and our resilience and readiness against some of the criteria that we see in the All Wales report, perhaps around page 105, the Audit Scotland criteria. I know we do the routines, we do the SIPFA review in the context of the annual governance statement, but I wondered if there was perhaps merit in doing a bit of a self-assessment across some of those criteria and learnings that Audit Wales have shared with us in their report. particularly around preparedness. And the other thing I think Governance and Audit Committee would be interested in going forward would be in seeing the development of a value for money strategy in the council. I think that might help us as well, and it would help with the assurance levels that we have around sustainable powers and its impact. I don't expect detailed answers on that now. It's just some of the things that occurred to me that we could be doing to strengthen the authority's resilience and response to some of the messages that we've seen in these two reports. I'm going to close there, and I'll give you the very last word, and then we'll move on.
Only to just touch briefly on that, we do an annual financial resilience assessment. That was published last summer. We'll be doing the same again this next year, which picks upon a level of ratios, internal comparison around resilience, and changing trend over time. We will look to develop that maybe with some of the pointers from this report.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks very much, and thanks everyone for your contributions to this item, which touches on, you know, the operational and the very, very strategic. So thanks everyone for your contributions, and thank you again, Gareth, and the wider team in Audit Wales for providing us with such a thorough and thought-provoking set of reports. It is very much appreciated. So I'll move us on to the corporate items and move us on to item 7, which is our Q3 fraud and error report. And I will pass over to Yvette, I assume.
Yes, thank you very much. If my
Very
voice gives
welcome.
up, then Mary will step in for me, I'm sure. So thank you very much. I will take it that everybody's had the opportunity to read through the report. So I'll keep it as brief as I can, and then obviously happy to take any questions that I'm able to answer for you. I just wanted to bring some clarity and a bit of context, really, starting on page 236, if I may, please, where it's detailing the current cases, in brackets fraud, that are ongoing. Some years ago, I think it was now, we were asked to provide more detail about the type of cases. So obviously we do give that. So for example, we've got employee cases, we've got council tax reduction scheme, blue badge, carers allowance, all of those listed with the numbers by them. Just to sort of say for that part, where these are in progress, we have worked really, really hard, and I'm sure, you know, everybody knows this because everybody's been great working with us to promote fraud awareness and reporting concerns as early as possible. And so we get a huge number of referrals, which is fantastic, both internally and externally, that come through. At that point, obviously, we look at all of these cases, and you don't know from the outset whether it's going to be a fraud case, whether there is going to be even an error in it or anything else like that. So really, until the point, because it's all evidence-based, and until we have a chance to look through those and examine them thoroughly, which will sometimes involve getting information from other service areas or speaking with our HR partners, we do not know what the outcome is going to be. So really, so for example, where you see those numbers against them, that tells you exactly the types and numbers of those cases that we have at that time that we're looking at. What happened to them, we don't know until we've investigated them. So I just really wanted to sort of bring some context to that, which might seem a bit stark at times, thinking, oh gosh, these are huge numbers of fraud cases coming in. You can't prejudge what it's going to be. We have to look at it. That's the whole purpose. And we look at it from a completely balanced perspective, working on evidence only. So I just really wanted to bring that, if I may. So that gives, and then further down, obviously, you can see then where we've concluded cases, where there's no further action, or there was no evidence, or it was completely insufficient. There might be cases where we've made recommendations which might involve obviously tightening up controls and process, and we might be able to bring in our SWAP colleagues to help with that also. They're detailed in there. And then as we move further down onto page 237, at the bottom I've added another box, because at the last meeting I was asked the question if we could give some more information around some of the other work that we do in the cases and the numbers for the proactive error and review work that my team deals with, which is around council tax and business rates and such like. And I'll explain a bit more in a minute how this ties in a way with the National Fraud Initiative work that our colleague Gareth was speaking about earlier on. for these numbers are literally thousands, and they change, you know, thousands over a year that my team review, because we look at all council tax discounts, all council tax disregards, all council tax exemptions. Now, the NFI picks up on council tax single person discount, but actually we look at all of the other discounts as well, and we run as an ongoing, revolving, continuous review all of our discounts and disregards and exemptions. So we capture those as early as we possibly can. With the greatest of respect, the NFI do a great job in their proactive data matching, but it is biennial, so that's 2 years, and it doesn't cover all of the elements that we thankfully are able to cover with our own proactive work. And that is something that we're really pleased and proud that we are managed to keep on top of, and it does provide some good results. Now, not all of those are going to go on to be fraud cases. Some of them are you know, a vast majority of them are error cases, but they still need correcting, because we still have a duty as an authority to bill correctly, whether that's on a domestic premises or whether it's on a business premises. So just really wanted to give an example in there with some figures around that, so that it makes it clearer for everybody what we are doing. And I really hope that's useful. To get definitive numbers for each and every one of those, you'd be employing me to do nothing but look at those figures, because this just would be impossible. And in case anybody thinks I'm trying to get out of that, I did share with Mary, you know, the impossibility of doing that, because obviously the numbers change on a daily basis, and it would be impossible to do that without a huge amount of admin time to put into doing that. So moving then on, obviously onto page 238, you will see then I clarified last time that the results that we report are literally starting from the beginning of the financial year. There are no monies carried forward from the previous year. This is all within our financial year. You can see those figures there. There's an additional box that I've added in this time so that you can understand that, you know, our work goes wider than just Powys in a way. Excuse me, Powys monies, because the other public purse monies on there, the 50,000 just over, you can see, was actually part of joint working with the Department of Work and Pensions, and it was work that our team did that raised that additional overpayment, that then obviously Department of Work and Pensions are able to raise this overpayment and seek recovery of, because it is public funds just the same. So whilst it's an effort and it takes a long time, because obviously things are difficult with the DWP, you know, we're very, very keen to maintain working with them where they will, you know, accept the uptake of the work and where there is a risk to the public funds. So I just wanted to explain that bit from that perspective. And apart from that, really, just, you know, to reiterate that whilst we think we're tackling fraud and we're tackling error, it's nailing jelly to the floor, and we are absolutely trying to move as fast as we can with that. And we really, really welcome any sort of questions, any learning, any suggestions of what we can do better. And we attend lots of different forums, you know, with CIFAS for argument's sake, and with CITFA to understand more about what other councils are doing, and sometimes other financial institutions, because that can lead us also to think differently about how we're doing our proactive work, how we might be able to implement some controls to protect ourselves better. And that can involve working obviously closely with our own service areas as well. And thank you very much for taking the time to read and listen to me waffling on. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Yvette, and thank you very much also for responding to previous comments of the committee in terms of the design and the contents of your report. It is very much appreciated. Councillor William, I did see your hand up. Is it still up or no? I'll bring in Councillor Pete, then Councillor Elwyn, then Councillor Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, and thanks, Yvette, not only for the report, but the additional clarification around page 326, which was paragraph 3.3 in the report. I just wonder, I mean, obviously wouldn't want to get you bogged down with doing loads of statistical reporting, and much keener for you to crack on with the very good work you're doing in terms of the anti-fraud there. I just wonder if to perhaps make interpretation of the report by, say, external parties easier. It may be, rather than calling them, say, current, in brackets, fraud cases ongoing, if we had something like potential fraud cases referred to us, whether that may be it, because I do guess at the moment they are referrals, and as you say, they've still to be investigated and proven. So perhaps just a little bit of change in the terminology there may help that interpretation for external parties.
Happy to do that, Councillor Pete. Thanks very much. I will do.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Pete. Councillor Elwyn?
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I noticed there's a reference to 6 employee cases there. I think that was the same figure for the last report, the last meeting. Is there a time frame to sort those cases out? The reason I say that is because I think it's very important, it's a clear message to members of staff, of course, responsible their duties and responsibilities, and we also have fiduciary duties as councillors, but also it sends a very clear message of openness and transparency to the members of the public and our ratepayers at the end of the day.
The time frame you mentioned there, Councillor Elwyn, is very, very difficult because you cannot say, well, we're going to investigate this in 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 6 months, because until you're actually investigating, you don't know how far that takes you. And for example, and this is a hypothetical example, if we were investigating a member of staff who has allegedly claimed mileage falsely for the last 6 months, if we look at the last 6 months and we get the information from payroll and from the service area and such like, it would then be reasonable for us to look further back to see, has this been a situation that has been happening for much longer? And it could be that we are looking at 3-4 years worth. We then have to look at what checks have been made in the service area by the line management about approving these claims. Have there ever been any challenges? Has the person had the claiming policy explained to them? There's so many things, and we are reliant upon getting information from the service areas because obviously we don't have direct access, and it's not our responsibility to be signing off every employee's claim for mileage or whatever else. So we cannot, I mean, it takes as long as it takes, and we have to pursue that line, not just with employee cases, but with every single case, because that's how it has to work. It's looking at evidence and showing that we have clearly explored every avenue that is needed that will point towards or away from any offences being committed. Within that, we also have to look at whether there has been any fall down within processes or policies or failings by staff to address things. You know, so from a point of view, it could be a line manager that says, oh no, I've never talked to my member of staff about how to claim or what to claim. And I'm using mileage as an example here that hopefully is easy to sort of understand. So you cannot put a time frame on it. You just cannot put a time frame on it, because where do you stop investigating? Because the right place to stop investigating is when you have exhausted every avenue that you need and must pursue that's reasonable for the allegation or allegations that you're presented with as an officer. I hope that answers your question.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Elwyn, for your question, and thanks, Yvette. Councillor Chris?
Yes, thank you for your report. I think it's very comprehensive and stuff on there and really helpful. On page 238, you mention about, and you just mentioned it in your response to the previous questions, about travelling expenses, and you've mentioned on there that there'd been some increase in claims and that had been quite significant. A question then is, you'd related it to the policy and it needed to be reviewed. So when was it last reviewed, and do you have structures and processing of that renewal of policies, not only with mileage but more broadly on there? And then a question for me is, was the misinterpretation of that policy an accurate reflection of how those employees were interpreting that policy, or was there any willful interpretation of that policy going forward? And then did we hold any accountability to any individuals going forward? And finally, is this covered off in mandatory training induction or on a face-to-face with line managers? Sorry.
Right, lots and lots of questions in there.
Yvette, can you just hold off just a tiny wee minute? Thanks, Chris, for raising all of that. Yvette, I will want you to respond, but I also would like to open this out to Ian Halstead from SWAP as well, because when I read this section, my mind immediately went to the role of internal audit in this space as well, and given the overall financial position of the authority, I think there's merit in having a wider audit of payroll generally, and payroll overpayments, travel, sickness. You know, I personally think there's probably a role for internal audit in this space, and perhaps even wider than simply the business that we're talking about in this particular report. So I just wanted to flag that up and give Ian the opportunity to come in answer to Councillor Chris's points, as well as yourself, Yvette. So that's why I stopped you mid-sentence. So if you could come in now.
Can I come in, Chair? Yes.
Well, and you come in, and then we'll go back to Yvette. Yeah.
Just to outline the work that we do, obviously, throughout the course of the year, we carry out some work that includes areas that are potential fraud areas. Payroll, there are many areas, but payroll is one of those. This year, we've just done a piece of work on overtime. We've done work on expenses as well. So that continual pieces of work around those areas that would represent high levels of risk of fraud, we do in a continual cycle. So as and when we do those, if we have ones that represent a risk, we'll bring those to the committee.
Thanks, Ian. Yvette?
Right, okay. I'm trying to remember all of Councillor Chris's questions, but I think as I can see Paul in the picture here as well, I mean, certainly we don't deal with the reviewing of the policies. That's dealt with by a different, different service area. So Paul can probably comment on when they're reviewed, when it was last reviewed, and any changes that need to be made. So can I ask you to step in for that one, Paul, please?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Yvette. Yeah, that particular policy is currently being reviewed now, and it's to be completed by June. It's about expenses and subsistence in general, but we need to pick up on that particular point around car mileage. The other thing it's alluded to or mentioned in Yvette's report is we're not waiting for the policy and then acting. We're actually making checks now and calling people to make sure they're claiming properly. There's some background work being done in the background to make sure that people actually understand what they should be claiming. So yes, the policy is being reviewed, and yes, the payroll team are questioning people where it's clear that they're not claiming things properly. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks, Yvette.
Okay, yeah. So I'd just say that payroll have also picked up some duplicate claims and things like that. So they are looking at it when, they think there's either been a mistake because somebody's forgotten that they've already submitted one and then they've put another one in. So they are looking at those and stopping those, which is great as well. So they're alert on that front. Councillor Chris, you also asked about what's happening about whether people genuinely make mistakes or whether they're just basically using the opportunity to try and say that they've made a mistake. If we have sufficient evidence to bring a case to a formal interview under caution, which obviously where we would question the officer about that, they would have an opportunity to present their side of the story, which is right. Obviously, everybody has that opportunity in a criminal case. So if it goes that far, it's obviously at the point where we have significant evidence that we are looking that this needs to be dealt with as a criminal case. Once we've had the interview under caution, depending on what that person has been able to provide or say or whatever, then a decision is made further on by a sanction panel, which is totally independent of our team, about whether it's appropriate to prosecute the officer or what the case would be. I just wanted to say, reassurance wise, that as far as whether they're dealt with from a prosecutory perspective, which obviously costs the council money anyway to prosecute people. And I know there's been questions about, how much is spent in taking people to task over these sorts of things vis-a-vis what we get back. If we're talking about £200 or £300, it's going to cost us more than £2,000, maybe £3,000 to get somebody into court. That's not to say that we wouldn't do that if there were aggravating factors from that point of view, if there were other things in consideration outside of mileage, for example, as we're looking at here. But where there is overpaid mileage, or where somebody has claimed for mileage, say for arguments for a weekend when they don't work weekends, and we know that, then they are required to repay that. And there will be a plan put in action then, you know, for payroll to recover that money from the member of staff. And it's a similar situation where somebody has either not been working their hours that we've established that they owe us hours, which obviously has a cost to it, or they've taken leave where they didn't book leave, that they are required to rework those hours so that they're not lost from that perspective. So hopefully that gives you some confidence that these things aren't just, oh well, that's left, well we've lost that money. No, we don't consider that we lose the money. For us, you know, we're very cognizant of the fact that pennies make pounds, and pounds are really, really needed, and that's the whole point of why my team do what we do. And I'm sure other people are thinking across other service areas about how they can save and prevent this happening in the first place.
Thank you very much, Yvette. Thank you, and thanks, colleagues, for your questions. I will move us on to agenda item 8 and bring in Gwilym, who's going to talk briefly to the Food Standards Agency audit of our emergency out of hours contact test from July this year. Gwilym.
Thank you, Chair. Responding to urgent incidents outside of normal office hours is essential to protect public health. To test arrangements, the Food Standards Agency made attempts to make telephone contact with all local authorities in relation to a serious food hygiene incident. As outlined in a report, I'm happy to say that auditors were able to confirm that Powys County Council has effective arrangements in place to deal with emergency out of hours contact. And as such, I'll leave it to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Gwilym, and I was really pleased to read that we weren't amongst the authorities that were on the notice, so to speak. So I will invite any comments or questions from colleagues whilst offering a positive assessment from me on the contents of the report. I don't think there are any questions for you, Gwilym. I think that's good. We passed the test. Thank you to you and your team for your diligence in enabling us to pass the test. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair.
If there are no questions, I'll move us on to agenda item 9, which is the corporate self-assessment action plan update. And I'll invite Catherine to just briefly introduce this item on the basis that we assume that all colleagues have read the report. Catherine, over to you.
Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, so in terms of this item then, so it's on page 55 of the agenda pack. So as part of our annual corporate self-assessment process, we do need to identify any actions to increase the extent to which we will meet our performance requirements. So as a council, we have to evidence that we exercise our functions effectively, use resources economically, and that our governance is effective. So the corporate self-assessment from 2023-24 was approved by Cabinet in July of last year, and there is a link to the full report on page 257. So the update today really is intended to inform the committee in terms of what progress has been made against each of those actions by the relevant areas. So on pages 257 to 258, there is an overview of the 10 improvement actions, and also the detailed progress updates for each of those are through from page 259 to 275. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Catherine. I'll open excuse me. I'll open to questions from committee members. John.
Thank you, Chair. Just trying to get myself in view. After the draft assessment report was shared with our committee on July 24, we had a feedback session, and in particular, committee members welcomed, this is recorded, I think, in the appendix to the report. Committee members welcomed the additional clarity provided around Sustainable Powys Transformation Programme. Members had queried how the council would evidence planning and progress being made and how this would reflect in the programme's performance and financial reporting. Officers provided assurances that the committee would soon start to see the detailed plans within Sustainable Powers, including the cost analysis associated with proposed service redesigns. I don't recall having seen any of these cost analyses, and I'm just wondering when they're going to be made available.
Thank you, John. Thanks very much. Who would like to take that question? Catherine, Jane?
I'm happy to come in, Chair.
Oh, Emma, Chief Executive.
Yeah, I'm happy. We just got to be careful there's no duplication, because actually scrutiny have seen detailed proposals with financial elements. So I think we just need to be clear on the ask, really. So, for instance, I referred to earlier in my comment on the national report, fostering services. That's already there. If you want to see it, you can. It's already been through health and care scrutiny. There were already costs on the leisure proposals, although I recognise that that's at a pause at the moment. But there were details surrounding that, and then there'll be other reports coming through in terms of daytimes opportunities, Powys own care homes. There's also been, you could have the detail in terms of how we've utilised the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, but I think what we need to do is ask ourselves what it is specifically that you want to draw out of that is different to the scrutiny that's already been undertaken in the other committees, because I think we just need to try and avoid some duplication. So
Yeah, it's in fairness, it's not my duplication. I'm quoting from the appendix on the report, which said that our committee would soon start to see the detailed plans.
I think if I come in there, Emma, completely appreciate that the detailed scrutiny is rightly done in scrutiny committees on a topic by topic, project by project basis when particular changes are being proposed to particular services. I think what Governance and Audit Committee have been yearning for and are really would help us to gain higher levels of assurance would be something that gave us a sense of the whole programme and how it all fits together. And the quantum of financial change, and I'm using the word change advisedly to avoid using just the cuts word, but the financial strategy underpinning the whole of Sustainable Powys as a programme of work and how it all fits together. What are the dependencies in connection with the whole programme? What are the risks? What are the timescales? What benefits, financial and other benefits, emphasis, other benefits to services and people? When do those benefits drop out, and what is the impact? And importantly, a coherent overarching structure like that enables any organisation to address some of the points that were made in Audit Wales's financial sustainability report, which, forgive me, I didn't pick up then. One of the things that report talks about is decision making. And something that I always hold in the decision making space is not making a decision is in effect a decision, and especially when any organisation is delivering significant strategic change, not making decisions has an impact on the whole of the delivery programme. So to give this committee a higher level of assurance, it would be good to see something that we could recognise as the total programme, its sequencing, its timescales, its delivery, risk, so that we can understand, is risk mitigated when the programme is implemented, or is risk heightened when perhaps items within the delivery programme are delayed, and what is the risk of delay where perhaps a decision for whatever reason is not made. And so I think what we're yearning for is not to take over the scrutiny committee's role at all, but to see how it all fits together as a coherent programme. I can see Jane's hand is up as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's really helpful. Would you welcome a confidential briefing?
A confidential session would be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that there are things.
We'll stay there and then and share that intel with you. Yeah.
That would be good. Jane, do you want to come in, or is Emma kind of answered?
I will come in just briefly, because I think, you know, in terms of sustainable powers, it's not a project, it's a whole program of work that's going to span multiple years. So I think where you'll see it reported will be through a lot of our corporate plans, our medium-term financial strategy, our budget plans over the next 5-10 years, our capital program. But you'll also see then individual specific projects that accompany it and are part of it as well. So I hear what you're asking for, but it's very difficult to pull all of that into one place, where I think most of our overarching plans will already, it's factored into those. But I think if we can have that confidential session, as Emma's just sort of suggested, we'll be able to share a bit more detail around that with you as well.
Thanks, Jane. And I do appreciate that it's a programme of work, not an individual project. The risk of not defining it is that it can't be measured and no one will ever know, I'll use this word advisedly, when you succeed. Yeah?
Yeah, fair point.
Nobody will know when you succeed if you haven't defined what you're doing and where you're going. I can see that Councillor Chris wants to come in, and Gareth Hall, and then Councillor William as well.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Catherine, for the report. I think it's helpful and very useful. I want to turn to page 263 because there is a section there around training, particularly around violence against women and domestic abuse. I was a little bit surprised that within here it's still got school staff at only 61%, and I just want to be assured that that is increasing up, or what, if not, what steps and actions are being put in place to address that. Also, there was another bit, just bear with me, let me come to the report itself. It mentions also then about safeguarding for volunteers. Do the service areas that are overseeing that have then a compliance register, and is that then available if needed? What's the process and system behind that?
Thanks, Chris. I can see Nina. Nina, are you coming in on that? Or is Sarah? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I think Sarah wanted to come in about the staff, and then I can come in about the volunteers. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, right. Okay, Sarah first, then Nina.
Yeah, I can just give a quick overview of where we are and changes we're making to improve that, if that's okay, Chair. So to increase the rate for the Group 2 Voucher SV delivery, we introduced training delivery within the education safeguarding team this time last year, and that was to augment the corporate offer and to make sure that compliance with that group of training could be increased. Alongside that, we issued a school training matrix which identifies mandatory and essential training roles per school role, not just you know, as a whole. And but what we've identified recently is for those staff that are undertaking the Group 2 Ask and Act, so the higher level training, they may not be undertaking the lower level Group 1 e-learning routinely. That's not an across the board statement, but because they're getting trained at a higher level, they may not be realizing they need to do the lower level training as well. So for all the Ask and Act that we're delivering as of this month going forward, proof of completion of Group 1 will be required before we deliver that Group 2 training to them. We will also go back and review those that we've delivered Group 2 training to, and any that may not be compliant for Group 1, we will request that they undertake that as a matter of urgency. We're also trying to make sure that the importance of the training is shown across all types of school staff, including governors. So we've developed a VAUDA SV governor training session, which will be trialing with the Governor Safeguarding Network next month. And the Safeguarding Governor role descriptor was reviewed over the summer holiday, and that now includes a significantly increased reference to VAUDA SV and the training and the whole framework. So there are a number of approaches that we're taking to reinforce the message and also make sure that staff are really clear on the fact that they need to not only do the higher levels if they're an in-school member of staff, but they need to do the lower levels as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Chris, does that deal with your question?
It does. I just want the assurance, is that level going up, or are we still at that same level of 61%? Because that, to me, just particularly for the sector where it's in, I was surprised, you know, because I think the report does emphasise that certainly from the councillors' perspective, members, that has increased, but that area, and particularly in that area, it was just a surprise on there, and I just want the assurance that that's been addressed at speed to ensure that we put in safe systems and processes in place.
Thank you.
Would you like me to come back, Chair? Or
yeah, I think if you can give the necessary assurance, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, it is certainly front and centre of area of work that we know that needs to be promoted and improved at pace. I would just like to say that the Ask and Act Group 2, we have the highest compliance rate in the region out of the 4 areas. So it's making sure that school staff understand the requirement to undertake that lower level as well. And that is a clear job of work over the next couple of months. There hasn't been an increase since the figures, because I believe they were drawn just before Christmas, and we've had the Christmas break. So,
okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it sounds like you're on it, and perhaps this is something that we'll come back to, Chris, and seek further assurance in a few months' time. Nina.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Chris, for those questions. And just to give you further assurance, these are 2 areas of priority for the Corporate Safeguarding Board moving forward. So apologies that you don't have the activity report here with you today, but you would have seen these 2 picked up and discussed. And just to assure you that we'll be, every time we meet, we'll be looking at that compliance rate for the school staff to monitor that improvement that Sarah's just talked you through as well, just to give you that assurance. And then the other area that you asked there was about the corporate oversight of safeguarding training for volunteers. This is being picked up by the board as well as an area of priority and focus moving forward. We are currently doing some work to look at corporately how we can oversee that using existing perhaps systems that we use for monitoring staff. So we're looking if we can extend it to include volunteers, etc. So that's very much start of a work in progress, but I look forward to updating you through future Corporate Safeguarding Board activity reports in due course. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Nina, and thanks for your questions, Chris. Gareth?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to say how much I welcome the offer of the Chief Executive of a meeting on the on sustainable powers. Look forward to that. I think some of the themes that came about that discussion around sustainable powers are applicable to the other actions. I think what I'd like to see in that tabulation, first off, I recognise that there's no start and finish with sustainable powers. As Councillor David said earlier, that's an ongoing process. But I'd still like to see some key milestones along the way to show that you're on track, and maybe use another column for some notation to be added. So to your point, Chair, that we don't want to start treading on toes. So if there's scrutiny by other people, that could be visible then from that that tabulation. So we can measure how well on track we are performing against these milestones and some timelines as well.
Yeah, thank you. I certainly think that's a good suggestion, Gareth. And I'll leave the suggestion with senior officers as we move forward. I've got Councillor William now.
Diolch, Cadeirydd, thank you. And thanks very much for speaking to this report, Catherine. Looking at page 259 to 60 of the pack, picking up again around sustainable powers, which is priority critical status on track. There's just one or two areas there that I'd like a little bit of reassurance on, particularly as it relates to partnership working, because there's a number of our partner agencies referred to under that heading. But in order to deliver some of the objectives of sustainable powers, particularly around redesigning things in the context of place-based planning, I think we need to have a more intense bilateral relationship with the Bannau Brycheiniog National Park. And I know there are people on this call, I mean, some of us are currently members of that authority, others, other senior officers have cause to engage on particular topics or particular urgent needs within their directorates, such as issues around development policy, the development and delivery of care facilities, housing projects, employment-related things. But I think we have lost a level of the collaboration and monitoring and liaison that applied for a number of years quite successfully pre-COVID, and to some extent we haven't regained those. Clearly, one could challenge members such as myself to help to deliver that, but I think that's only part of the process. We need to have, at a senior officer level, greater engagement, and I think that goes both ways, because I referred in my question earlier to Audit Wales around the 22 authorities plus 3. I think we've got, for example, within POIS we have something between a quarter and a third of our key settlements that fall within Bannau Brycheiniog National Park. If we have issues where we have a significant divergence on issues around strategic planning and so on, I think some of that and its consequences need to be picked up and better understood. Our own planning authority has been through a significant improvement in recent times, and that's to be commended, all those associated with that. But I think we need to seek, not just through the RPB and the CJC and these other elaborate architecture structures, but we need some more intense bilateral working. And I know there are people on the call who probably might be sympathetic to that. I'd like to see that reflected here, and challenge brought corporately to the National Park Authority.
Thank you very much, Councillor William. With a view to the time, I'm not going to ask officers to respond directly in the meeting. I'll ask them to take your thoughts and observations away and think about how matters can be improved in the way that you have suggested. Councillor Jake.
Oh, thank you very much. And I wasn't going to respond directly to the Bannau Brycheiniog point, but I think it is a point well made by Councillor William. I just wanted to come in because the comments of Gareth Hall and others are really pertinent in relation to landmarking the sustainable powers process. But just to provide a slightly counterpoint to that, and Councillor William is absolutely absolutely right. Where we are looking at sustainable Powys, we've described this, and it appears elsewhere in the report, about co-production, co-design, working and collaborating not only with statutory bodies and partners who we have a mature relationship with, but developing and strengthening new relationships with town and community councils where they don't exist, and building on some of those things. That is a dynamic, iterative process which actually doesn't follow the step-by-step sequence that we might all hope to do. And the reason why that's really important, and I'm passionate about this, reshaping what we do around localities and place-based conversations, strengthening the resilience in place of communities to fill a gap potentially of service provision that we might leave in a community as we seek to change. Our aspirations to do things tomorrow are, of course, fettered by putting sufficient time and capacity into empower communities to, to bring them up to strength, so that they are mature enough to take things over. Because we've got to move away from, and this is what we're trying to do here, the Powys Council that does things unto others, and does things with others, and then supports others to do things with themselves. And that, to me, is where we will make some of the savings out of that. And that is very difficult to put precise timelines on, but it is really important for you to challenge and say, in which case, Jake, are you doing enough around the engagement process, and how does that sequence? What do they know now? What do they need to know in the future in order to help be informed to make those decisions? And I'm certainly working very closely with Catherine and Diane now. I think I've been given, because of my passion on this, some of this place-making responsibility as a lead to help Councillor David deliver the sustainable power stuff. And we've described just this week a whole series of next round of meetings that we're going to initiate in the spring to re-engage with communities, because, as I say, it's a continuous flow iteration. We might take 2 steps forward and then 1 back as we realize that we need more time to develop, and perhaps the leisure is an example of that people might have in their mind. You're doing some work, you get to a point, and actually we realize we need to go back and do some more work and to reflect, in order to take people with us around some of the difficult conversations that either are needed, or to change the nature of the outcomes, as was mentioned earlier, that are achieved. So not as straightforward, but I'm absolutely agreed with the principles that Gareth and others have said about setting some of that out, and I hope we continue to populate this space.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jake. That's a very welcome intervention. So thank you for your comments. I'm just going to pause. My strong preference is that we move on to the risk deep dives, but I will just pause briefly to check in that if there are any final comments on the self-assessment. No, right. I'm going to move us on to the risk deep dives. And thank Gwilym and his teams for the work that has gone into preparing for the deep dives. Just to remind us that our objective with the risk deep dives is to examine in more detail the strategic risks that are presented to us on a quarterly basis, and to do a bit more assurance testing on the Cabinet's assessment of those risks, the nature of the support that they receive from senior officers in terms of managing and mitigating those risks, and to seek assurance that the ground is being covered to examine and mitigate the risks. And the risks ultimately are risks to the delivery objectives of the council, and that's why it's so important that we continue to examine them. So, and Councillor Jake, you're here specifically in support of the discussion of the 2 deep dive risks. So, unless Councillor Jake, you want to come in at this point, I was going to hand over to Gwilym. Right, okay, that's fine. I was going to hand over to Gwilym to introduce item 10 on the deterioration of the school building stock and the related risk on the revenue maintenance and capital funding. And then there's a short presentation, and then we'll have time for questions, and we'll do the same on the risk that we're examining at item 11. So Gwilym, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you can see the PowerPoint.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. The risk before you was historically with the education service, but was transferred over to strategic property with the introduction of corporate landlord. As you can see from this slide, the estate is diverse in nature and vast, and has some very complex buildings and estates contained within it. First of all, in relation to risk 31, which relates to the risks about maintenance of the school estate, you'll note that the service is currently reviewing the actual description of the risk and whether this is clear for all readers. So that is something that is a work in progress, and we'd welcome any comment on that. But I believe that does need further work to make sure it is clear about what it actually covers there. Now, the risk identifies that if the school estate is not maintained, there are a number of serious consequences, and these are listed below within a slide. Generally, I'd like to point out the health and safety risk there, and also the potential for disruption for the teaching day as being some of the bigger risks. To control or to manage the risks, there are a number of controls in place, and the number of controls have increased recently following a review and have gone from 1 control to the 8 that are listed within this slide. And this is currently still a work in progress as we look for other controls in place to make sure that we can provide relevant parties with assurance that this risk is being managed to an appropriate level. There are 2 risks I'd like to point out. That the first is, if there is an unacceptable health and safety risk that cannot be managed, we will close the asset or limit access to the asset to manage risk. I think that control is necessary to make sure that health and safety is appropriately managed. The second one I'd like to highlight is the building condition surveys and assessments that were completed at the end of last year and are currently in the process of being evaluated. I think this is a key action for this risk, and the fact that it'll give us a better understanding of our estate, and then will enable us to program works going forward. That is very much a work in progress, which again will hopefully help us provide assurance moving forward. The second risk that I've highlighted is risk 30, which relates to the statutory compliance work that was undertaken by strategic property, mainly relating to assets contained within the school, such as boilers and equipment, etc. You'll note that there are some serious consequences of not undertaking this work in an appropriate manner, including what I've mentioned before, which is health and safety and the potential requirement to withdraw assets from use if this work is not undertaken appropriately. Again, similar to the previous risk, this has been reviewed recently, and the number of controls have been increased from 1 control to the 6 that you see before you. Again, if the asset cannot be seen or cannot be managed in a safe level, we will take it out of operation, and that is a really important control. The other one in relation to this element is the team working. This cannot be done in isolation with just strategic property. It does involve a large number of teams within the authority and outside of the authority to make sure that the authority can make informed decisions on the assets and ensure that we are compliant as much as possible. There is significant governance in place. I will not go through all the whole list here, but there is significant governance in place that we report to, including this board, this committee, which is not listed on here, but again provides appropriate governance and assurance. I'd like to leave you there with that then, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gwilym. Thank you. Thank you for that brief summary, and on your initial point around taking the opportunity to review the risk description, my personal view is that that's an extremely healthy thing to do from time to time. So, you know, I think that feels entirely appropriate to me. I'll open to questions to Gwilym and his team if he's got people in support of him. Colleagues. John.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Gwilym, we know from past experience that there's been an enormous backlog in the maintenance of the school estate and you know, its contents. My question is the proposed budget, does that enable us to catch up at all, or are we just treading water?
At the moment, my assessment of the situation is that we are treading water on this one. We are trying to make improvements where possible, and there are certain projects that the strategic property and education team do where we have seen improvements to schools, but the budget required in order to catch up and bring everything up from a maintenance perspective is vast and currently unavailable.
Thank you for your honest opinion.
Thanks for the question, John, and thanks, Gwilym, for being so candid. Additional questions for Gwilym? Marianne, you wanted to come in?
Can I come in, please? Yeah, thank you. I just want to emphasise really that these risks are managed in collaboration, and I have to say that. So since strategic property took over the corporate landlord function, all well and good, but we work as a team. So it's the education, property, catering, health and safety, everybody in the mix. I have to emphasise that. And then I think what's improved over the years as well is the governance of the management of this risk, and we're also setting up a new education, health and safety forum very soon that will then feed into the corporate health and safety forum. We're also in discussions with the schools and with head teachers, as they have responsibilities for the day-to-day running of the schools. And we're having very, very fruitful discussions with them around roles and responsibilities. They need clarity, we need clarity. So that's something we're working on with head teachers as we speak. So I think this is an always improving area. So just to give you some assurances around that. Okay.
Well, thanks very much, Marianne. And I'm taking a lot of assurance from your remarks on the governance of the management of the risk, because that's exactly what we would encourage. So especially in the space where, by definition, the risk has got several different departments have a significant stake in the management of the risk and discharging the responsibilities, so that your governance point is very well made. So thank you for that. Thanks. I can see Jane wanted to come in as well, and then I'll go to Councillor Chris after Jane.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, I think it's important just to note, what Gwilym is saying, our resources are extremely challenged. And I think in terms of that capital perspective, the impact on the revenue budget cannot be understated, both in terms of either meeting those ongoing repair and maintenance costs or the capital investment needed. It's a significant ask. So this is why that review of our estate is absolutely fundamental. The release of capital receipts, borrowing, as Richard Basson, I think, highlighted to everybody last week, should be the very last port of call. We have to reduce the assets that we hold in this authority and be able to use those receipts to help us support the elements that we have to from a statutory provision basis. So, you know, it's a really important factor, and I just wanted to highlight that here again today.
No, thanks very much, Jane. It's a point extremely well made. So thank you for that. And a reminder of the Treasury management advice that we had last week is really pertinent. So thank you. Chris, Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Gwilym, for the report and stuff on there. I just wanted to ask a question a little bit more around obviously when we have inspections of school services through Estin, have they picked up the physical environment elements of those schools? And then is some of the negativity to a report coming through due to that physical environment not being up to current standard?
I'll respond to that if that's okay. Yes is the answer. We get seeing more and more now through Estin inspections that they are picking up on issues to do with the school premises themselves, issues to do with site safeguarding. So we are taking a very proactive approach to that. So we're collating all the information. We know our schools and we know where there are issues. You know, we know those schools where we've got public rights of way cutting across them, etc. We know where there are issues around fencing and that kind of thing. So we're proactively pulling all this information together now in terms of being ready for when Estin come in. There's a lot of work to be done, and going back to budgets, there's a lot of work to be done around just getting our schools you know, completely, fully safeguarded, etc. So that's a piece of work that's ongoing, and we're sort of looking collaboratively at that. There's a lot of schools, as you can imagine, and then we need to have that information to hand, and that's a piece of work we're working on. Estin will write now to the local authority to highlight any issues around site safeguarding or property. So that comes to us, and then that's something we have to address, and that's a change from previous. Just an aside as well, in terms of the risks and the impact that William mentioned, I think there are some impacts that we haven't really fully articulated, and I think it's the impact on teaching and learning and the impact on pupils. There's two things. I think there's one, it's the fact that the condition of the school buildings currently will have an impact on the school's ability to operate, and will have an impact on pupils' education. Schools are working really, really hard to make sure that is addressed. There's also the impact on staff well-being of being in buildings that maybe not aren't great to be in. So those are two things. The investment we need to put in now is around prevention and preventative investment. There's also then a risk, should the worst happen and we have to decant a school or move them to another building, there's also then the risk to a child's education through that as well. But just to highlight, there are sort of non-property related risks, and the impact on education is a key factor in it all. Just give you that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Thank you. Any other points on this particular risk? I think Gwilym and Marianne, thank you very much for bringing this, and the discussion hasn't been particularly long or detailed, not least in part to the assurance that you've both given us that you are working collaboratively and that you are homing in on the key issues in a really tough financial context, and also the salutary reminder to Jane on the overall asset management position of the authority and the impact that it has on this risk. And it could potentially have a very positive. There are opportunities there if we can make the disposals to support current priorities. I think the committee would encourage you both to continue to work together and to continue to test the risk, its comprehensiveness, and the responses that you make. Risks are always dynamic, and I get the sense from you both that you're very seized of a dynamic risk management approach in this space. So thank you very, very much to you both for what you do every day and for bringing this discussion topic to the committee. So thank you. Gwilym, I'll keep you in the hot seat and ask you to introduce our second risk deep dive, which is the impact of a pandemic or an influenza like illness on our service provision and our responses. So Gwilym, if you could introduce that, and we'll have a little discussion and a test of that risk as well, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to defer to Matt Perry, who will introduce everything.
Matt? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry about that, Matt.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Thanks,
Gwilym, thanks, Chair. Yeah, so Greg is going to share the slides. It's only doing a quick introduction because Greg will have a lot of the technical knowledge in terms of this. But this presentation sets out our response to a pandemic breakout and other influenza illnesses. But we are mindful in terms of the wording of this particular risk, and obviously we'll take stock of that and perhaps shorten it and make it more succinct. So if I take on to, is the slides up?
Yeah,
right, okay.
Yeah, they're there, Matt, thanks.
So if I take you on to the next slide, just a brief background. So as many of you are aware, we had the pandemic that started to ramp up in early 2020. So this background basically sets out over the 2-year period how we were identifying and monitoring this risk, and just shows the effectiveness of obviously of the risk management within the department. So March the 4th, we added it to the risk register with I rating. And then literally a week later, then we had to increase it to severe. And then over the period of the year, the risk rating then was reduced, but it remained severe. And then as we come up then to May 27, 2022, the risk rating reduced, was reduced to I due to the impact of the vaccination programme. And then in November 2022, then the risk was reframed to reflect a generic scenario rather than focusing on a single disease. So it certainly tested our resilience in terms of the department and adhering and working to the COVID pandemic. But it just obviously highlights how these things can arise quite quickly. If I go on then to the next one, and next slide, then in terms of completed actions, this sets out all the actions. And again, these have all been logged, so it gives yourselves assurance in terms of the different elements that have been implemented over the last 3 years. So we've updated the business continuity plans. We've got an establishment of an internal silver command, Powys County Council representation on Powys Teaching and Health Board as well. We've got good communication now and engagement with schools and also with residents and staff members. We've established internal goals as well to ensure effective business continuity, and then ultimately established effective lines of communication then with residents, staff members and schools, and obviously working jointly then with Powys Teaching and Health Board. I'll pass over to you now then, Greg.
Brilliant, thank you, Matt. So, and thank you, Chair and members, for inviting us here today. So I'll continue then by looking at the controls which we currently have in place regarding this risk, and these are predominantly actions which are delivered in partnership with Powys Teaching and Health Board and our wider partners. But these are delivered for the wider benefit of our residents and communities, reducing their own risk, which in turn helps to support our internal actions. Should we be in the unfortunate position where we enter a pandemic or other influenza-like illness situation. So as members of the committee may be aware, much of our emergency planning is undertaken as part of the LRF. So if you're not aware, that's our local resilience forum, a body under the Civil Contingencies Act. So this is based on the Dyfed Powys Police footprint, made up of the emergency services, the 4 Dyfed Powys local authorities. These are known as the Category 1 responders, and then wider agencies such as utility companies, transport authorities, and known as the Category 2 responders. So the LRF plans to and prepares to respond to a wide variety of incidents, enabling a joined-up approach to planning and response. So pre-2020 then, the national planning assumption regarding pandemics was around influenza. However, the LRF held a plan for excess deaths, which was activated, and this included establishing a temporary mortuary and working very closely with the funeral director industry. Again, we worked very closely with Powys Teaching Health Board to activate the mass vaccination plan. We supported identifying sites, communications, telephony, and as well as at the mass vaccination sites themselves. So since then, the pandemic, reviews of all the plans been undertaken at the LRF level, and the influenza plan has also been updated to cover wider pandemic and influenza-like illnesses. The excess deaths plan also has been updated, as well as the mass vaccination plan. We participate alongside Powys Teaching Health Board in their exercise of that mass vaccination plan. So additionally, we've now got really strong relations with our counterparts in Public Health Wales and Welsh Government Health Protection Division. So we've got a wide variety of structures in place to ensure that locally we're able to respond to any emerging threats and to ensure that our local activities are aligned to the emerging national situation. So actually, these liaisons have a dual purpose. In fact, they not only ensure we've got the latest data and surveillance available to us, but also in terms of developing, relations with these key partners, so that should we have to move to an incident footing, we're all aware of our responsibilities and roles, and actually, we're aware of those other people in the room. So as we'll come on to shortly, one of the key controls we've now got in place is funding from Welsh Government via PTHB for a health protection team, and all the activities of that team are again monitored by Welsh Government quarterly to ensure that that team's achieving the aims of that funding. The Communicable Disease Outbreak Control Plan then was last updated in 2022 and published in 2023, and this plan is essentially the go-to guide for any outbreak which may occur. So the new edition takes into account the system-wide learning from the pandemic response, recommendations from independent reviews of the Welsh health protection system, and the changes to legislation. So the plan ensures an effective and coordinated approach taken to outbreak management, from its initial detection to outbreak declaration to formal close and review. So it provides a consistent approach to outbreak management across Wales and describes all the roles and responsibilities there. Powys County Council officers are all aware of their roles and responsibilities, and we've actually exercised this twice since the new version was published. So the first was exercise CYD, and that was to provide the national system with assurance of our local capacity and capability to respond to a communicable disease outbreak. And a further more specific exercise was held in September of last year to ensure preparedness for any response which may be required for Mpox. So just to note then, I did mention the health protection teams. This is one of our current controls which is in place. So this team was set up following the decommission of the Test Protect service at the end of March 2023, where the Welsh Government provided each health board in Wales with funding for health protection, with an expectation that local authorities would be given a portion of this funding to develop a partnership-based approach to health protection. It identified 6 core health protection principles there, which all activities of the team are aligned to. So that's responding to respiratory viruses, including COVID-19, to have preparedness plans in place to scale up in the event of a threat and a future scenario, to deliver the national immunisation framework for Wales, to deliver a sustained increase in the provision of prevention, testing and treatment to meet in the WHO global disease elimination targets, to undertake wider health protection work, and to work together locally and nationally to support equity of access and opportunities. So this funding provided a small team of 7 officers within the local authority, and with a similar sized team, including a number of clinical specialist posts in PTHB. But it's actually very much a joint team. Most of the activities, in fact all the activities of the team, are delivered in partnership. So we've got 3 priority areas then. So that's health protection response. So in recent months, this has included supporting high-risk settings in Powys. So that's mainly our care homes with outbreaks of COVID-19 and influenza. And I described the current situation as being kind. We have had a very kind winter this year in terms of needing to respond to incidents, but also actually preparing for future threats which we may not be aware of. So, for example, I referred to the Mpox exercise which was held earlier this year. Again, proactive health protection, it's vital really that we can support our care homes early years settings with their infection prevention and control. So a team go out and deliver training, on-site audits, and provision of information and guidance to the care sector. And one of the reasons perhaps we have had a kinder winter is because of that proactive work which has been taken. And in addition, there's wider proactive work being taken in terms of hepatitis elimination and harm reduction from substances. There's also a focus there then on health equity and improvement. So this is preventative work to ensure our communities, residents, staff themselves are in the best possible position to maintain our own health and well-being, meaning we can protect our own health should we enter a pandemic scenario again. So an example of this, which members may be aware of, is our Farm and Fit work. We've done lots of work for our agricultural communities regarding their own health well-being, including basic health checks in livestock markets across the county. So in terms of future work then, we're awaiting publication of 2 key documents which will really drive this agenda for this team moving forward. So that's the Welsh Government Health Protection Framework and the UK Government Pandemic Respiratory Plan. And these are both due for publication in spring of this year. And following the publication of this, all activities of the team will jointly be reviewed by both ourselves and Powys Teaching Health Board to ensure that we are aligned and actually we're in best possible position to support our staff, residents and communities, and therefore sustaining our own vital services internally. So that's it from the slide. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Greg. That's really comprehensive account, and thank you very much. And again, a reminder that the articulation and the management of these risks are not single team matters. They're very much a collaboration and a partnership. So thanks for a great account, and apologies to you and Matt again for my fumbled or poor introduction to your leadership of this presentation and risk management. So thank you very much. I'll open the floor to questions from members. If you could drop the presentation down so that we can see members coming in if they've got any questions. Thank you very much, Greg. So I've got Councillor Chris, I've got John, and I've got Councillor Pete, and I'm gonna leave it at that for questions because we are starting to move towards the end of the meeting. But thanks, Greg. Yeah. Chris, John, Pete.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Greg. Really helpful. My initial question is in relation to the last slide, but one that you put up, the one that had the protection teams in on the one of the I think it's the second bullet point down, said there was no base budget, and I just wanted to know whether that was a risk. And just to have that assurance of that. And then in relation to obviously our experience of COVID, were there any key lessons learned that we built in to move us forward with our planning and contingency planning around that aspect as well? And then I'm glad to see that prevention is focused within the strategy moving forward. But what activities do we do in relation to communication with our own staff around them supporting uptakes of vaccination programs? Because I'd recently read something that flu vaccination this year hasn't been as taken up as widely as on previous years, and yet we've got a major challenge within health services regarding flu related illnesses and I'll stop there, Chair. I will have to go in a few minutes after those responses, Chair. I do apologise on that, but I'm meeting a
Thanks, Chris, but thanks for your support and contributions to today's meeting anyway. I'll ask Greg and Matt to address your questions before I bring the others in then, given that you need to pop off quite soon.
Yes,
Greg.
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. Matt, are you happy if I address those points? So in terms of the risk of there being no base budget for the team, that is a current risk on the Planning and Regulatory Services Service Risk Register. So there are controls in place there. In terms of actually, we've begun conversation with the Health Board, and they're just awaiting their confirmation of the funding for Welsh Government before they're able to tell us what funding we'll have in place as well. And also we utilise some SPF funding to support some additional posts there. So that risk is being addressed, and all the team are on fixed term contracts, but Welsh Government and Health Board are aware that this work would cease from the local authority should that funding cease. In terms of the lessons learned from COVID, I was involved very heavily in Test Trace Protect team at the time, and I think for me it was that partnership working, that sphere of you're only one small cog in a very big wheel, if you like. We could not have done what we did as a local authority, in my personal view anyway, without the support of our residents and communities. So PAVO are a key partner on a lot of the activities we're doing, and we do work very closely with the voluntary sector to try and deliver as much as we can. So that I think would be my key lesson is working in partnership. We're always going to achieve more. And finally, in terms of internal work around the vaccination, etc., there was corporate comms issued back towards the tail end of last year to all staff regarding all the vaccination options available to Powys residents. And I believe only last week we issued some guidance on winter respiratory infections to staff as well, under Diane Reynolds' name as responsible director. So yes, I hope they do answer your questions.
Yeah, thank you for that assurance.
Thank you, Chris,
Yep.
and thank you, Greg. So I was going to go to John. John, do you still have a question?
No, my query was around the budget, and that Greg's answered it. Thank you.
Fine. Okay, fab. Thank you, John. Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, and thanks, Matt and Greg, for the presentation there. I may not at the moment be the best advocate for actually having the anti-flu jabs and anti-COVID and things like that, but hey, that's another story. It was just, I think it's right that it focuses on services there. I'm pleased to see that the line, the officers' roles and responsibilities are well communicated and well known. But I guess just in terms of joining things up, where do councillors fit into this? So I guess there's almost a story like, God forbid, but if we had a terrible outbreak among the 68 councillors, how is Powys governed?
Good question.
I don't mind coming on that point. So, in terms of all our risks, we do have regular catch-ups with the portfolio members in terms of these specific areas. But equally, as these become identified, they are monitored, and if need be, they are escalated up to CLT cabinet, CLT, where they're discussed, and then obviously appropriate measures are put in place. So it is certainly, there is a system for it to be flagged up and monitored at a political level.
Thank you very much, Matt. And I can see Councillor Richard Church would like to come in. Councillor Richard.
Thank you. Yes, I come in as the portfolio holder for a Safer Powys, which includes emergency planning and also health issues. And I attend monthly briefings with the team, which includes Greg. And he will inform me at those briefings of any impending risks, across the health spectrum, which he feels that I need to be aware of. And clearly, if an issue were to arise between those meetings, I'm confident that he and Gwilym or Matt would inform me.
Thank you, Councillor Richard. Thank you. Councillor Pete, do you want to, does that address your points at this stage?
Yeah, sorry, Lynn, I was just trying to find the buttons, I couldn't find them. And I suppose the bit I was just driving at was to say it's officers and are fully aware of their roles and responsibilities in this, but say as a councillor, you know, God forbid half of the council goes down, you know, 34. I don't know what my role, responsibility is in this. How do we make decisions? And I just wondered if that needs to be considered in terms of that needing to be documented, how we would operate in that situation.
Thanks, Councillor Pete. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest that we leave that with Councillor Richard Church and Matt and perhaps Clive as well, in terms of the sort of overall governance arrangements, and ask them to reflect on how we would manage at a political and a full council level if there was a particular number of our councillors indisposed due to a pandemic. I'll give Graham the last word and then I'm going to close this down.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just backing up really what Councillor Richard has said there, I was in fact the portfolio holder at the time of the COVID outbreak, and I think we may well have missed a chance in this report to have sung our own praises a little bit as a council, because I think we were very much the leaders across Wales in the way that we dealt swiftly and purposefully with the outbreak and dealt with the situation as it was. And I think it would be fair to say that all councillors were very closely involved and kept in touch all the way through that period. And I'm sure we're even better equipped to do that now. We were pioneers in the use of Teams to continue the work of Powys, and our use of IT and developments throughout the whole pandemic really was. We were leaders throughout Wales, I think.
Thank you very much, Councillor Graham. That's really helpful context and reminder to everyone of the role that Powys has played in these developments and responses. So thank you very much for that. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. We've had a very full agenda today and we're not quite finished. I'll move us on to agenda item. I mean, hopefully will only be another 5 or 10 minutes if colleagues can bear with us. Agenda item 12 is designed just to give a brief update on where we are with the working groups. I've been chairing the internal audit working group. We had to postpone a meeting that was planned for earlier in January. So we've got one planned for the next couple of weeks, and we're examining the aged recommendations that haven't been discharged, and how properly to deal with them. And Ian's already been doing some work on that and will further advise the working group. The working group is also considering its work on any detailed limited reports that the committee chooses to remit to the working group for more detailed consideration. And we're also still in discussion as to how we might have earlier sight of audit remits prior to their starting, because there have been a few situations where I think the remit of an audit would have benefited from some insight prior to it being started. Ian, is there anything you would add to my brief summary of what Internal Audit Working Group has been up to recently?
No, I think that was an excellent summary, Chair. The only thing to add on top of those, we're looking at a slight change to the terms of reference to be more reflective. And the only other thing we picked up on, we're looking at purchase cards, and we're looking at lodged cards in particular. Yes. So we've got someone coming back to us with a presentation about how lodged cards work and the risks and the controls on that.
Thanks, and that's following the procurement audit. Yeah, thank you very much. Any other working group updates from those who are chairing the groups? No. Yes, Pete.
Yeah, sorry, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just in terms of the whistleblowing working group, we have a meeting planned for early February where we'll be sort of looking to finalise the few remaining outstanding points around, for example, the template letters and communications. And then hopefully if that gets agreed at that working group meeting, then we would look to bring a report to the next meeting of this committee straight after that for their review and approval as well.
Thank you very much, Pete, and thanks for all your work on whistleblowing. It's been quite intensive over the last few months, so thank you very much for that. John?
The buttons like Councillor Pete. I missed a meeting the other day. I'm an observer on the ERC HALPS working group. I unfortunately had a hospital appointment and couldn't make the meeting, but I've had an email from Carl this morning, the chair, and he says that yes, indeed, that specific working group will be has now completed its initial objectives, and to this end, they've identified an ongoing need, he says, to address the staff concerns and challenges related to their housing work. To this end, we are seeking, he means his committee, are seeking approval from the ERC committee to establish a dedicated subgroup focused on housing repair issues. And it also goes on to say, one critical issue identified by the HALPS working group is the ongoing IT problems experienced by staff using the work pads on site. They were assured apparently that a new IT system will be fully implemented and operational by September. And to ensure this timeline is met, we've set an internal deadline for 31st of October. And I'm no doubt he'll come back to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks for that update, Pete, and thanks for that update, John. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions for any of the three of us, please? No. The work programme is our final substantive item for today. I'll just make a couple of brief comments myself. We're having 2 meetings in March, and the original reason for that was the timing of the Q3 risk management report, and Bet's made a particular request if we could to do that earlier in the month. And albeit we have a agile and rolling internal audit plan, we will have an annual approval of that plan, which will take place on the 5th of March. And Ian, can I remind you just to canvass members for priorities for 2025-2026 internal audit work prior to completion and our consideration in March, please. Yeah,
absolutely, Chair. It went out to officers yesterday. It will go out to members today.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ian. That's excellent. Thank you. And I think I mentioned under the sustainable finance discussion the value of our value for money report, which I mean, I don't think it'll be something that we take in March, but I think I'd like that added to the forward work plan going forward, perhaps in a few months' time. Any other questions from other colleagues about the forward work plan as presented at item 13?
Chair, can I come in again?
Yes, of course, can you?
On the 5th of March, I noticed we've got the audit of the sustainable powers approach, an internal audit that we're currently progressing. Obviously, it's important that we get this to committee at the most earliest convenience. I will just say that it is borderline to meet the 5th of March, and if anything, is probably more likely to be the 27th of March. So just to, we'll progress and we'll push it as fast as we can, but we have to go through a due process, obviously, because it's very important. But just to put that there at this stage, it might be the 27th.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. That's been noted, and I do appreciate and I support the fact that internal audit reports go to the corporate leadership team prior to their coming to audit committee. But I think today's meeting really underscores how passionate the committee feels about the levels of assurance and the robustness of the programme, given its underpinning importance to the services provided to the people of Powys, as well as financial sustainability of the overall organisation. So it's something we're very, very keen on, but we do appreciate that, you know, due process has to be gone through. But thank you very much for flagging that up. Any further comments on the forward work plan? No. Well, it remains for me to thank all of the officers who've contributed to today's meeting, those who have contributed by being on screen and supporting the discussion, but also those who are more in the background. Your work and efforts do not go unnoticed by this committee. We know how hard people work across the whole authority and within SWAP and Audit Wales to support the work of the committee and the good governance of organisations across Wales. So thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance and your contributions. And if members of the committee can remain online after the formal end of the meeting very, very briefly, I'd appreciate that for our committee reflection. But having said that and thanked everyone, the meeting is now formally drawn to a close. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you.